Great Britain, right? The king from across the Atlantic. He didn't step in America. He just stayed there and collected taxes from the 13 colonies. Not only these colonies, he ruled all over the world, even India, right? Indians were paying. India was one of the richest countries in the world when the British came. By the time they left us 200 years later, we were one of the poorest countries. Swindled everything. So without no taxation without representation. Have you heard of this famous quote? Yes? That is people protesting. You just tax us, but doesn't give us representation. We don't get to represent ourselves. One of us not ruling us. It's someone else ruling who doesn't care about our problems. So self-rule is one of us governing us, not ruling. King rules. Government, elected officials govern. Right? So self-rule, that's what self-rule is. This America created a type of government what we have. Its model come from, write down this, two, A and B under self-rule. One is called democracy. What does democracy mean? You know how to spell democracy. Demo means people. Kracy, C-R-A-C-Y. Kracy means rule. It's Greek. It came from Greek, ancient Greek, that is more than 2,000 years old. Athens, a small city in Greece, right? City-state. It's a small city-state at the time. Now it's a big city. Athens, or Athens, A-T-H-E-N-S, A-T-H-E-N-S. Athens created democracy. But at the time, democracy is direct democracy. Write down direct, like D-I-R-E-C-T. What is direct democracy? So a bunch of men would gather in an auditorium-like structure and say if they want to go to war, one of them will get up on the stage and say, we should go to war because blah, 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 blah. People will clap, you get down. Another guy will know we shouldn't go to war because blah, 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 blah. Clap. Then they will take the votes on both sides. Whichever side wins, they go to war or not. Every policy is determined like that. Do we do it like that? Do you make a decision to whether America should go to war or not? You and I don't. Who does? Congress votes. That's right. Both the House of Representatives and Senators vote whether to go to war or not. Not you and me. Not you and me. That's where the second word comes. Republic. Write it down. Republic. R-U-P-U-B-L-I-C. That is an idea from Roman Republic, where senators were elected. Senators, S-E-N-A-T-O-R-S, S-E-N-A-T-O-R-S. Senators, the Senate, the word itself comes from Latin. Latin is the language of the Romans, ancient Romans. Senility, old age. These are old people elected to the Senate. So, republic. What does that mean, republic? In there, you elect people and they go and make decisions on your behalf. You don't get to make decisions. You get to make decisions on who you elect, but the elected officials make the decisions on your behalf. Now, here's the question. In the United States, that means we do elect people. They make decisions on our behalf. Everything from going to war, how much to tax, who to tax, how much, and everything. Like giving economic stimulus packages, right? All this government decides. We don't get to decide. So does that mean we are a republic? Write down the third one, C. We are not a democracy. We are not a republic exactly. We are partially a democracy, partially a republic. Really? Yes. We are a mixed system. So write down the mixed system is democratic republic. We are a democratic republic, the country is. So what does that mean? Well, even though the elected officials make decisions on our behalf, we could put pressure on them by protesting, marching, all those things, and putting pressure, calling the elected officials. That's a democracy. That action is democracy. Republic is you have them make the decision. So democratic republic, we have a mixed system and we have a self-rule. It is Even the president of the United States, it's one of us. It's the citizen of this country. And then when he finishes his job, he comes and becomes an ordinary citizen, just like Barack Obama or Jimmy Carter, the oldest president alive. Everyone has to, boom, come back and be an ordinary citizen. Yes, of course, they will be known around the world. They will never be like ordinary, but they are not having powers like they had, because a king, until he dies or be killed or overthrown, he will have powers. And that's a king, but not here. They have finite time. One of us we elect, right? The king dies and the king's son becomes. Can Barack Obama's son, daughter automatically become? No. Trump's daughter automatically become? No. They have to run for office. We get to decide. Democratic Republic. Very good. Self-rule. That means one of us elect the highest leader, members of Congress, city council in New York City, the mayor, everyone is one of us there, making the rules and regulations and laws for us. Okay. Fourth point, write it down. Limited government. Limited government. When I say limited government, you're like, that means small government? Yeah. Limited, small government. This idea goes back even before America's independence. Yeah, even before 1776. 1691. Okay, so the king ruled all the 13 colonies. We talked about it. And the king appoints a governor, right? People don't get to elect like now. The governor. So New York, there was a governor was appointed by the king of England, and he was ruling all the New England states. New England states means New Hampshire, Vermont, all these states, Massachusetts, all these New England states. And Connecticut said, "Nah, I'm not going to be obeying to what you say." And the king and the governor went there to fight with the militia, which is armed men of Connecticut, saying, "No, we're not going to obey." And he said, "I have authority from the king. You should comply. You're under my jurisdiction." They said, "No." And they said, "If you're getting away, are you going? Are we going to put a bullet through you?" Well, they said, "The sunlight is going to come through you unseen." That means they're going to kill him. So the governor got back to New York. Of course, the king didn't know about it because across the ocean, it takes months for information to go from one place to another, weeks in ocean travel. Now it's like 6-8 hours flight, not then. Yeah, totally different time. Okay. So limited government idea is not just at the time. Even after America's independence, people did not want to trust the federal government. Remember, there were 13 independent colonies. They all had a small government. But when the whole central government was created, George Washington became the president. That's a federal government. They didn't want to trust it because they are afraid of anything which is far away that they cannot relate to. And the trust is eroded over time. And even now, if you ask Americans, they trust the federal government lesser than state governments and city governments and municipals. Always. It doesn't matter, Republican or Democrat. But especially Republicans have a smaller government interest, limited government. In fact, Ronald Reagan, when he was running for president of the United States, he was a governor of California. Later, he was running for president of the United States. And in his campaign trails, he would say, the most scariest words to hear is, "I'm here from the federal government and I'm here to help you." That's the scariest words. Because his voters, conservative voters, believe in limited government, and he believed in government should get out of the way and people could prosper on their own. He said government is not the solution, government is the problem. How about that? And he's running for a government job. He won 2 elections, right, as president. So a limited government idea still exists, and it'll exist all along, as I said, even after we are gone. The next one, write it down, 5th one is individualism. Individualism. you could write in this individualism versus we dot versus communal. Okay, what do you mean individualism versus communal? These are two ideas but opposing ideas. So when you say individualism, Americans, rugged individualism, they are not communal. I'll give you examples to explain this. You go to, say, Norway or Denmark or Sweden, Iceland. These countries are Scandinavian countries. And you will notice that people who work there have so many benefits. If they lose their job in, say, Denmark, 80% of their income they will get for a year or two sometimes. What do you mean? We get like, I think 450 or 460 is the maximum per week you could get in unemployment benefits. Many of you may not be able to pay rent with that money in New York City because it's expensive. But there, they get 80% of their pay. Unemployment benefits are high. Same with if you have a child, you could stay in home for a year with paid time off. All those things, why? Who pays for it? Government pays for it. Where do the government get the money from? They tax the rich. It's like 50% tax. It's very high, right? 50% tax. Here, if you take, corporations pay less. People pay, yes, in paper, corporations have high, but the loopholes and other things, finally, they end up paying almost 9%. That's the truth, okay? People pay about like 35% taxes. 50% there. But they use that for the benefits of the people. That's communal. We are one people, we support each other. That's the idea. America is about individualism. That means you're on your own. Your success is based on your work, not on what government gives or not. You could work hard and climb up the ladder. Have you ever heard of this saying? Pull yourself with the bootstraps, they would say. Pull yourself up with your bootstraps. I think Martin Luther King who said, what if someone doesn't even have a bootstrap? There are people who are so poor, right? So some people who are liberal would say like, yeah, Trump get to do business because his father gave him 480 million something inherited. But he said to minimize it when he was campaigning, I got like $1 million loan from my dad, nothing much. You know how many people would not be able to borrow $1 million from their parents, right? So government is the one which has to help. Government helps so that it, remember, equality. It brings equality to everyone. Anybody who wants to go to school, get a loan. That's government providing the loan. Those things were not there in the 19th century or anything. It all changed little by little. We'll talk about that later. So individualism versus communal. America is more of an individualistic society. It believes your success is not on others. It depends on you. You are on your own. If you fail, that's why poverty is considered here as your mistake, rather than it's the mistake of the background, where he comes from, how his settings, his skin color, the zip code he was born into, the schools he was constrained to go to because of the zip code he is born, and many factors which affects, which we'll talk about later, limits one's potential to grow higher up on the ladder. But that's the belief, American belief. These are belief systems. Ideas are group of cultural belief systems, right? Individualism. It has its benefits. Like Elon Musk, who came from South Africa. Why don't he stay in South Africa? He came to America and he rose all the way to become a billionaire launching rockets, SpaceX and Tesla cars. It is like about $20 billion worth. You can do it in America. If you go to Denmark, freaking 50% will be taken away. It's not that I'm saying that the country, Scandinavian countries, doesn't have billionaires. They do, but they're not going to be as rich as American billionaires because their money is taken away from them. So, like what we're talking about? America is so unequal.
I need to take a look.
That top 3 richest people have more money
Oh, that's funny. Hang on. Okay, so in this lecture that I have to listen to, it doesn't even say like you have to take notes. It just says listen to it, and I got two more that I need to listen to. I understand most of this. Like I don't think it's common knowledge if you like pay attention to politics at all, because this isn't. I don't even know if this what class it is. Let me check. I don't know if it's political science or I I think it is. It's American government, so it is political science. But like all of this should be like fairly well understood, I would think. I don't even know if you guys can hear this or not, but this is a lecture that I'm they did online. And I have to listen to this is the first one. I have to listen to three of them, and so I'm just gonna play chess while I do it. It's gonna be like pretty easy.
90%. Yes.
Okay.
That's how unequal our society is because it's based on individualism. You could go as far as high you want, but there will be many struggling people. America was not like that before. What do you mean not like that? When George Washington was elected 1790, when he went around the country, there will be some poor people, some rich people, most of them middle class. Whereas now, there's some small middle class, a small percentage of highly wealthy, a huge chunk of people, but like 500,000, half a million homeless people. You wouldn't see that in George Washington time. Not even in 19th century when Lincoln was president. It changed. Why? What happened? We will discuss this in this course. You would learn so much about American society and American culture in this course that you'll be able to teach a lot of people who are much older than you, who've been living long in America, who would not know. And that's the fun part of knowledge. You would see things differently, not just teaching others and enlightening others, but to see things differently. Okay? So the next one, write it down. Sixth one, American dream. When I say American dream, you've definitely heard of it, right? All the time, people say that. But do you think other countries have a dream? I come from India. You think we say Indian dream? No, we don't have Indian dream. You go to Japan, you say Japanese dream. It's American dream. What's that dream? It actually comes from the idea of even Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, I mean, story in few lines. You got to check out the book Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin if you're interested. That book has created so many millionaires in the 19th century. That's the story of Benjamin Franklin. In a short book, he put it. This is Benjamin Franklin from a family of like 13, 14 children. He just left Boston as a teenager in a box full of books, few books, a couple of clothes. He moved to Philadelphia. That's like moving to another country at the time, from Boston, Massachusetts to Pennsylvania, Philadelphia. He started working in a printing shop as like assembling the letters. By the age of 40s, early 40s, he owned the store and he is modern equivalent of a multimillionaire. Retired from the business. But the business, he made people to run it. And he went on to do politics, diplomacy, and scientific research. Remember the lightning rods in top of all the buildings? Benjamin Franklin's invention. And you probably heard of the with the electricity in the kite, flying the kite and putting the key, you would have seen it. Benjamin Franklin. He was able to spend time on this because money kept coming from it. And how did he do it? You have to read the book. I'm not going to tell you all the story here. That's the American dream. What is that in one line? It is if you have the talent and hard work, two things, you can reach whatever you set your mind on. Pretty cool, right? So most of the American dream is a white picket fence, a house with car, a job, able to pay maybe children's college. That's the American dream. I've heard students say a billionaire, to be an Instagram star. No, those are not American dreams. Yes, you could become as successful as you can, but that American dream in general is a middle class life, and that you could reach. Now, here's the question. To everyone who has a talent, as it said, that is capacity, and capacity for hard work, those two things, can reach the goal, what they want? Not really. Now, it has changed. Remember, I talked about inequality. Inequality affects growth. So I have to show you, because your book doesn't talk about it. If I draw American society into 5 rungs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? Like a ladder, 5 rungs. So this is poor people. I'm sorry, poor people, okay? Just above poverty, or just above. Middle class, upper middle class, very wealthy, the top 1%. In 19th century or anything, if you're born here, like Lincoln, you could go all the way here. It's not because of wealth, he become the president of the United States, right? And Americans like to tout that Lincoln was considered as a rail splitter. That means like he was working, breaking wood, and that was touted. And later all the candidates now talk about how they grew up as an ordinary person, and now they get to run for president or mayor or whatever. Now here, if you're born in America now, based on your skin color, your growth here to even this level is affected. Very small percentage of them make it here if you're black. Like, I don't want to give you the wrong numbers, but 34, 35%. If you're white, maybe 15. And not everybody who start here, work hard, will come here. In the past, if you're born here into money, and if you don't work and maintain, you will drop. But now, if you're born here, you will be there because your parents will send you to fancy schools that'll open doors for you and will get you opportunities. It's called stickiness factor. Where you are born determines your life course. Stickiness, like stick, you'll stick to that. It's hard to grow. Upward mobility, this is called. Upward mobility is lower in America now compared to Canada, Western Europe, or Nordic countries. Some even said like American dream is more possible in Denmark than in America. It's sad. Both the right and left agree how to address that policy changes between right and left. Okay, that's American dream. Let's talk about the last one, 7th idea, which is an important one. 7th idea is religion. Religion is a powerful one idea. It's the idea 800-pound gorilla in American politics. Americans, 95% of them believe in God. 60% of them go to church, members of church. 40% regularly go to church. Usually around the world, poor countries are highly religious. When countries start getting richer, they will not be more strong affinity to God. America is the exceptional country. It has American exceptionalism. Have you heard of it? Exceptional country. In religion also, it's exceptional that it plays a strong role in America. And it plays a role in politics. But you heard of it. There's a separation of church and state. You heard of that idea? Separation of church and state. What does that mean? Politics and religion should not mix. Where did that idea come from? Some of you might say Thomas Jefferson. Where did he get it from? He got it from an American before American Revolution. His name is Roger Williams. Roger Williams, like Robin Williams, Roger Williams. And he was in the Massachusetts colony. Okay, I have a hard time pronouncing Massachusetts colony. And he challenged the governor. At the time, everybody has to go to church. The governor will say, we got to go to church. Everybody goes to church. He said, people who don't want to go to church don't need to go to church. That was a big challenge to the governor. You can't say that. And they excommunicated him. X means EX, communication. You know how to spell communication. EX, communication. That means you're kicked out of the church. You're like, oh, what's the big deal? At the time, if you're kicked out of the church, you're going straight to hell, down. And he was kicked out of the colony. So that means you're out on your own, and there are Native Americans who could probably kill you. He was almost 70 there. He walked in the snow. It's a long story, I'm making short. He was friends with the Native Americans. He spoke their language. He went and found his own freaking colony. And there, religious freedom was practiced. You know what's his name? I'm sorry, you know his name. What colony that is? Rhode Island. Rhode Island. Right. Now, Rhode Island is a smaller state. Now, you have to understand that idea was picked by Thomas Jefferson. Before I come to Thomas Jefferson, Roger Williams is a big believer. It's not like, oh, I don't believe in God, I don't want to go to church. He's a big believer. He thought mixing politics and religion will affect religion. Politics will corrupt religion, not the other way like people believe now. Now they think like, oh, religion will affect politics. Actually, politics will affect religion, he thought, and he doesn't want it to mix. Interesting, isn't it? Okay. Now, Thomas Jefferson created this separation of church and state, which is in our Constitution. First Amendment, Congress shall not establish any religion. They should not support one religion over the other. Also, exercise clause. We will talk about that in detail when we talk about Constitution. That government should not intervene in you practicing any form of religion. You could practice anything. I could just worship the table and say, that's my God. Nobody can stop me. That's the freedom to practice whatever religion I want. And the country has so many religions. Not Christianity alone has so many divisions. Each group, Methodist, Presbyterian, name it. There are Jewish, about 6.5 million Jews in America, Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs. It's a very diverse country. So when you bring religion to it, which religion do you support? You don't want to take support over one religion over the other, the government. And George Washington himself, at the time there were Muslims and Jewish in this country, went to the Rhode Island synagogue and supported them. Okay? He wrote a letter supporting their practice and the worship. So point is that there's a religious freedom in America. Government should not step in. So our motto was E pluribus unum. You know what that means? E pluribus unum. Yeah, pluribus, third, unum. That means out of many, one. Out of diverse different states, one country. Different type of people, one people. That was the motto. But now, if you look at your dollar bill or you go to court, what's the thing written right behind the judge? In God we trust. You could ask, wait a minute. You said separation of church and state, there's God. That happened in the 1950s when Eisenhower became president. He was conservative. Conservatives want more role of God in politics. They want to have school prayers in public schools. The liberals oppose that. Why do the liberals oppose it? Because there are people of different religious backgrounds there. If you just make them all pray to a Christian God, they have their God. So you're intervening in what religion they have to practice. So the fight still goes on. It's never-ending fight. Religion has an impact in politics, and it has an impact in many policies, including, for example, gay rights was stopped for a long time in this country, only in 21st century. Now, gays are allowed to get married, marriage equality. And the conservatives who opposed it was some of them opposing based on religious reasons, because it's written in the Bible that sodomy is bad. It's a story of Sodom and Gomorrah, if you're familiar with Bible. So religion shouldn't be part of politics. According to the liberals, conservatives want more religion in the politics. That you got to understand. Now, write down 8. This is not an idea. This is something you need to know. Culture, you know what culture is. I already mentioned. Political culture. Is political culture making the impact in America, or political institutions? So you could write political culture versus institutions. If you ask historians and anthropologists or sociologists, they will say, yes, political culture, what your culture is, that will have an impact. But if you ask a political scientist like me, I would say institutions. The institutions we build have a huge impact in the way our government our the policies made. Like, for example, if you take, okay, Americans wanted to have clearly a background check on the gun bias. This was after the shooting in the school, when Obama brought all the parents together and create a sensible legislation that will create a background check so that your mental health is clear, you could own a gun. Both liberals and conservatives in America supported for a background check. But did it go through Congress? It did not. Why? Because Congress, many of the congressmen were accountable to NRA, National Rifle Association. So institutionally, it blocked passage of that legislation. So that's how political institution I didn't define. You're an educational institution. Your college is an educational institution, right? Any Supreme Court is an institution. Congress is an institution. So institutions, these are organizations, make or break policies, not political culture. But if you ask sociologists and historians, they'll say culture, because people want certain thing by certain way because of their political culture. Political scientists like me would say they could want, like the gun legislation, still institutions decide, so institution is. So this is the difference. Now, I think if you study this thoroughly, understand it fully, you will be able to continue the journey with me in learning American government. I can't wait to teach you more things. Looking forward. Let's have fun this semester.
Okay. This is 4 days ago. What time is it? It is currently 8:06. I still have 2 more to watch. It'll be fine. American Government 101. What is this? Okay.
So much for coming. I also want to point out in the back they have brought pocket constitutions for you guys. So if you didn't grab one, go ahead and grab those. Those are from the league, and all of the books in the back are available for checkout. And now I will turn it over to our presenter, Rachel Van Houten.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you guys for being here. This is a really, really nice opportunity for us. So as Erin said, my name is Rachel Van Houten. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Larimer County. We're presenting tonight's presentation. The League has been operating since the 1920s. It was born.
I don't know what city of Fort Collins. Is this not Texas? Colorado. Okay. That was dead wrong. Cool. That sounds about right. Wrong as usual.
Out of the suffrage movement, the women's suffrage movement. And we are, as Erin said, a nonpartisan citizens organization.
Nice.
And our goal is to improve government and engage all citizens in the issues that affect their daily lives. Okay, so we are the Larimer County chapter. We operate it in all 50 states, also at the national level. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So being that this is kind of an introduction to American government, we're not going to go too deep into any one thing, but by all means, we have time for questions at the end, so please ask me those, okay? All right, so as I said, we're the League of Women Voters, kind of told you a little bit about that. So why are we here tonight? Why are you guys here tonight? Well, we've seen a real increase in interest in how government works, especially since the 2016 elections. So we've seen a real increase in interest, and I think that's partly because this last election was just so pervasive. I mean, it it invaded every part of our day-to-day lives, and there were a lot of emotions surrounding it. Regardless of the outcome, it really sparked a lot of interest for people who maybe didn't have an interest in government before, and that's really exciting. We think that's really great. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you hope to learn tonight? Anybody want to venture that? No? Okay, so you just came with an open mind. That's awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump in then. So what is civics? That's really what we're here talking about, right? Well, civics is the study of the rights and duties of citizens and how government works. Basically, it's our day-to-day lives. I mean, everything about civics affects us every day. The roads we drive on, the letters that we mail, who we vote for. It's not just about the president or your congressman. It's every day. Civics affects all of us every day. So first question, does anybody want to be brave and tell me the answer to this? Do we live in a democracy? We do not, actually. That's a common misconception, but I heard somebody say no. So our system of government is a constitutional federal republic with a representative democracy. It's kind of a long explanation, but it's not quite as short and sexy as a democracy, but that's what we live in. The difference being that in a republic, which is what we live in, you have a governing document that protects the rights of the minorities. So in a true democracy, majority rules, and that leaves a lot of people out. So we're fortunate we live in a republic where everybody has rights guaranteed, unalienable rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Speaking of which, we have the oldest written national constitution still in use today. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, of course it is.
No other country in the world can say that. That's amazing. And we're going to be talking mostly about government and civics at the federal level today, and the reason for that is because it's imitated at the state and local levels, but if we were to start at state and local and work up, there would be way too many exceptions. So we're going to talk mainly about federal, but we'll talk a little bit about state and local later. So let's talk about why we have the government that we have. This dude here caused a lot of problems for our founders. This is King George III. He was the ruler of England when the American colonies were getting toward the tail end of being colonies and getting kind of fed up. So he was doing what a monarch does. He was ruling his colonies from afar, but his parliament was really putting the screws to the colonists, charging them outrageous tariffs, implementing.
Okay, I want to push back on this. I do want to push back on this. 2 cents on the dollar for tea is the reason that the Boston Tea Party happened, to be clear. Now, the stamp tax, I'll admit, was fucking crazy, right? But the Boston Tea Party thing, I feel like that was a bit overkill for 2 cents on the dollar for tea. Destroying, I think today is the equivalent of $6 million worth of tea over a 2 cent on the dollar tax on tea. Kind of fucked. I think stamps, it was almost everything had to have a stamp on it, and for each stamp it was 10 cents a dollar, which is a lot. But I don't know, it's
ridiculous.
It was like playing cards, I think, and tobacco. It was a bunch of odd random things had to have a stamp on them, a stamp, and those took taxes.
Fed up with it. This is the Boston Tea Party, where they were objecting to tea tariffs. Here's some rioting, some more rioting and looting, and then some tarring and feathering. So basically, people
kind of
were
crazy,
just
in my
fed
opinion.
up. And that's when our founders got together and wrote the Declaration of Independence. You can see Thomas Jefferson there.
I'm fairly certain it was
Ben Franklin.
Let me find it. Tea tax on U.S. colonists. Because it wasn't something crazy as far as I'm aware. Tea Act, U.S. colonists. duty free, yada yada. And although the tax imposed by the Townsend Act collected on the colonies remained in force, colonists. I think most of this boils down to the Townsend Acts, which is probably, I would assume the Townsend Acts, Townsend duties. Yeah, it was multiple things. Like Townsend Act, it was a series of things, and then at the time, I don't know how many taxes, I'll say. So I could be very wrong.
Basically said, enough's enough. And July 4th, 1776, that's when we get a signed Declaration of Independence. And basically what this was the founders and the colonies saying, enough. You have just ruined our lives, basically. We're not going to live under a tyrant anymore, and we're done. Oh, I kind of cut off at the bottom there. But it wasn't until June of 1787 that we actually got our Constitution, which is what we live under today. So speaking of the Constitution, I'm not going to go too in depth in that because I would really encourage you guys to come back to next week's talk on the Constitution. That's going to be really great. So the first 10 amendments to the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights. And these are concerned mostly with our individual liberties. But even then, partisan divide is nothing new. Don't be fooled. This goes back to the beginning of our country. There were the Federalists who believed in a stronger central government and the Anti-Federalists who believed in stronger independent governments. So the Constitution, the very first thing the Constitution does is addresses the separation of powers. Because the founders were obsessed with never living under a tyrant again. And they didn't want any one group to have all the power
I don't know any
ever
openings
again.
for
So
here.
they built our
Right, I assume
Constitution
it's
to be strong
normal
and robust.
as it
And this was the
starts.
first thing they did. So we have
I'm not
three
entirely
branches
sure.
in our government. We have the legislative, which that is the first one that the Constitution lists out. The executive, and then judicial. So it lists it in this order. We're going to start with the legislative. This is the capital in DC. So this is comprised of Congress. 435 representatives in the House of Representatives, 100 senators in the Senate. So these are the people that make our laws. That's why they're called lawmakers. They approve presidential appointments. As you probably saw over the last couple of months, the Senate was approving President Trump's appointments, and they are directly elected by you and me. Congress can declare war. This is the executive branch, and as you probably recognize, this is the White House. This is comprised of the president, vice president, and the cabinet. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The executive branch is the branch that signs laws that Congress passes. Can also veto laws. And they pardon people, appoints federal judges, and commands the armed forces. Even though Congress declares war, it's the executive branch that commands the armed forces. Lastly is the judicial branch, and this is the Supreme Court building. So this is comprised of the Supreme Court and lower federal courts. This is the branch that rules if laws are unconstitutional. Technically, any law can be passed and signed into law, or any bill can be passed and signed into law, but it's up to the judicial branch to say if that's constitutional or not. They are appointed by the president, and the Supreme Court can overturn rulings by lower courts. There are 9 Supreme Court justices and a full bench, and for about a year, we were missing one. We only had 8, but they were still able to function. And Supreme Court justices do enjoy a lifetime appointment. So we talked about the separation of powers. Now we're going to talk about how those powers interact with each other. And this was another thing that the founders did to ensure that no one group had too much power, was they implemented these checks and balances. So each branch has very specific ways that they can keep the other 2 branches in check. The legislative branch has the most number of checks, and that probably goes along with the fact that they were the first one to be named, and they have the most detail in the Constitution, while the judicial has the fewest number of checks. But that doesn't mean that any one branch is better than the other or more powerful than the other. And we talked about the Supreme Court justices. So this graphic kind of shows us what these checks and balances look like. You got the legislative up top, executive, and judicial. And we can see things like the legislative branch keeps the judicial branch in check by impeaching Supreme Court justices or rejecting appointments to the Supreme Court. The executive branch keeps the legislative branch in check by vetoing their bills and can adjourn Congress if they so choose, if the president so chooses. Judicial branch, as I talked about, can declare actions and laws unconstitutional, and then they are no longer in effect. So you can see here, to me, this is just the beauty of our system and how we don't want anyone to be too powerful, because then what do we risk? We risk falling right back into what we had with King George. Sure. So the question was, when and why would the executive branch adjourn Congress? If the president wanted to stall what was going on, they could do that. I don't know that there's been an adjournment recently, at least not in this president's term. There are lots of rules surrounding, Congress uses what's called parliamentary procedure. These are the rules of debate, and both houses use it. And there are some really specific timelines and rules on what you can and can't do. And rather than guessing, I'm going to get you an accurate answer so we can tell you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about elections, because we just had a big one. The different types of elections. We have a primary. Everybody familiar with that? So in an open primary, this is where voters aren't locked into a particular party. This is not what we have here in Colorado. We have a closed primary, which means you have to declare a political party before you can vote in that party's primary. In some states, you don't have to declare a party, and you can still vote in the primary, but you can only vote for one party, one candidate. It did, yep, we're going to talk about that. Good call. And then there is runoff voting. This is if no one gets enough votes. It's called instant runoff voting. So we don't actually enjoy that here in Colorado, but I know that League does have a position on that, so we can do some more research on that. And then there's the general election. Local elections, this would be like your mayor, your city council person, sheriff, that kind of thing. And then special elections. I live in Loveland, and we just had one of these because one of our city council members was actually elected to the House of Representatives, leaving a vacant seat, so we had to have a special election in March to fill that seat. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about primaries. What this does is narrows the field down to one candidate per party. And we saw a really good example of this in the 2016 Republican presidential primary, where it started out with 17 candidates. 17 people wanted to be the Republican nominee, and it got narrowed down to one during the primary season. So the primary elections are executed at the state level, and dates and methods vary. So in the presidential primary season starts in like January and doesn't end until June in some states. Now, by that point, we pretty much know who the nominee is going to be, but we still have those primaries. And then, so you kind of touched on this, but does anybody know what a caucus is? Anybody familiar with a caucus? In the 2016 election, we still had a caucus, but voters decided they wanted to go back to primaries, so every election from this point forward, every presidential election will be a primary. The difference between a caucus and a primary is a caucus is basically getting together with your neighbors and voting. There are no ballots, no official ballots. It's not run by the state or the county. They're really run more by parties. And from personal experience, they can feel kind of unorganized because you get a lot of people in a very small space. Everybody wants to talk, and it can just feel like it is. It absolutely is. But I think that people get frustrated a little bit. When I caucused last year, I heard people come out and say, "Gosh, why did I even come to this? I don't really feel like I did anything." I loved going because, like you said, that was democracy in action, and that really gets my blood going. But for some people, it turned them off to voting, and that's unfortunate. So what Colorado voters decided in 2016 was they'd rather go back to a primary. I don't know if people would just prefer that paper ballot, like it feels more official to them, or they want more time to vote rather than just one evening. Because if it doesn't work with your schedule that you can't go caucus, you don't get to vote in the primary, and that's kind of a bummer. So my hope is that by going back to a primary, more people will get involved in voting that way. As we said here, yep. So from 2003 to 2016, we had caucuses, and now we're going to go back to primaries. So in the general election, this is where there's only one candidate per party. Many states do align their state and local elections with national ones, but they don't have to. This is why you can have elections in March, in November. It's really up to the jurisdiction. And the presidential election day is the same day everywhere. But it's not just candidates in the
November
general
5th.
election. I just talked about the fact that we voted to go back to primaries. That was in the general election. We also deal with propositions, amendments at the state level, tax increases, judges. You find all that on your ballot. So the Electoral College.
My bishops
this
or my
was
queen's about to get trapped.
pretty big deal in
That's cool.
2016. Caused a lot of confusion. So let's talk about this. So the original purpose of the Electoral College was the founders just didn't really trust that the people could choose their own president. Sad but true. But it's morphed into a more modern purpose, and that's that it does give smaller and swing states a
He's gonna
shot.
no, he's not going to put
We'll
a
talk
bishop
about
there.
that.
I don't
So
know what
electors
he's
are
doing.
apportioned based on the number
I'm
of
confused.
legislators they have in their state. So each state gets one elector per senator and one elector per representative. So we have 2 senators in Colorado and 7 representatives. So how many electoral votes do we get? 9, exactly. There are 538 total because Washington,
I can't
D.C.,
take here.
even
Wow,
though they
that's
don't
funny.
have representatives or senators, they still get electoral votes. They get 3. And who are they? They're typically people who are loyal to the party. And you need
double
270 to
up his
win, which is a
bishops,
simple
isn't he?
majority. So that's half the number of available electoral votes plus 1. 48 of our states are winner take all, and Nebraska and Maine are the exception. They can split up their electoral votes because that's the beauty of states' rights. They have the right to do that.
Sweet.
And only 5
So I'll put one
times
here.
in our history has a candidate become president after losing the popular vote. The most recent of which was 2016. And this at the bottom here talks about faithless electors. And what that is somebody who is an elector for their
Oh,
party
shit.
and they go to the opposite party.
That sucks.
It's not that common. It does happen. Not enough to turn the tide of an election. Okay, so let's take a look at a map here. You might recognize this. This is the most recent election. President Trump got 306 electoral votes, Hillary Clinton 232.
I'm just going to have to lose a night, I guess.
However, these were the
I
popular
do have a
vote
pawn,
totals.
which
Hillary
is
Clinton
useful.
won the popular vote by almost 3 million.
I thought it was
So how did she
6.
lose the Electoral College?
It's whatever.
Let's take a look here.
That's
See all these
fine.
red states? Well, they may not have very many electoral votes on their own, but you add all those up together, and that's a pretty significant voting block. Now, some of these swing states like Florida, if Florida had flipped the other way, she would have had a much better chance. Pennsylvania, which actually voted for Barack Obama in 2012. Ohio, same thing. Michigan, Wisconsin, all of those flipped from traditionally Democratic states to Republican, and combining with the other traditional Republican states gave Donald Trump enough of a boost to win the presidency.
Yeah.
Sure. So when you vote for a president,
What a shame.
technically you're not voting for the president. You're voting for that president's party that they
He's going to put
represent.
something here.
So in this case, Hillary Clinton did take Colorado.
Yep.
So they come out and say,
Fucking
Hillary
knew it.
Clinton won
Okay.
Colorado, won the popular vote in Colorado. She gets all of the Democratic electors. And those go in her bank. However, in Texas, Donald Trump won the popular vote in Texas, and he gets 38 in his bank. And so then the election's not really over in November. So then December comes, and that's when all of the electors come together and they get to cast their votes. So yes, for each state, there are a set of electors for the Republicans and a set of electors for the Democrats. So basically the Republican electors from Colorado, they get a set of steak knives. They get to go home. So it's the Democratic electors from Colorado, they actually get to go cast their ballot at the Capitol in Denver. They cast theirs. Each state's governor then sends
that's why I'm
their
doing that.
set
Fucking hell.
votes to Congress. Everything's verified, and then we have an inauguration. So the question was, if there are 9 electors in Colorado, do they have to go all blue or all red, essentially? Why does the party matter? The reason being that there are actually 2 sets per state. There are 9
shit,
Democratic
he can get
electors
out.
in Colorado, 9
No.
Republican electors,
Wasn't
and
thinking.
whichever candidate wins that state
That's funny.
gets those electors.
I like
They
it.
get to cast their vote. Sure. So the question was, if there are states with laws against being a faithless elector,
Damn.
why does the party matter? Why can't you just go with the 9 electors regardless? And I think you
Should
bring
just
up
do
a
one of
really
these.
good question that's
funny.
been happening a lot more lately is why do we even have the Electoral College? What purpose does it serve? I can tell you from my point of view, the purpose of the Electoral College is so that these states in the middle here that are unkindly referred to as the flyover states, you've probably heard that term before, they still get a voice. because individually they don't have very many electoral votes, right? They have, Nebraska has 5, South Dakota has 3. But by the way, the minimum number you can have is 3 because every state has 2 senators and at least 1 representative. So my home state of Wyoming, we still get
here.
3 electoral votes, even though we have just over 500,000 people in the entire state. So that would be my answer to that, is because it still gives those states a voice.
Yeah.
So
They
in
would
this
only have
case,
2,
you
I
know,
think?
it could be argued, what happened here? Well, I would say that the Democratic campaign maybe didn't appeal to those states very much, and this is how they showed that. But you know, I don't think there's really an easy answer to
think I
that
can
because that's what
push and
people
still
are
be
asking themselves a
fine.
lot now. Because we've seen this twice in our lifetime.
I think I can go
twice
here
in the
and be
last
fine.
17 years. All right, so we're going to look at the other time this has happened in our lifetime, and that was the 2000 election. This was much closer. President George W. Bush got 271, which is just 1 over the minimum number of electoral votes you need, and Gore got 266. But in this case, the popular vote was much closer than in the 2016 election. Gore
Let's
got
see.
just shy of 51 million. Bush got 50,456,002, just over 500,000
Yeah.
votes different. This actually prompted a Supreme Court case, Bush v. Gore. So again, Florida was a swing state, and that's what it came down to. So there was a lot of attention paid to Florida that year,
Think
right?
I'm
Hanging
going here
chads,
now.
pregnant chads. I don't really remember. So the question is, can we count on the concept of one person, one vote? I think that really still goes along with the
I can go
question
here,
of why do we have the electoral
and
college?
it depends on where they go.
I mean, in all seriousness, you both bring up really good points, and this is what people are talking about. And if you feel strongly about something, I would encourage you to reach out to your legislators. I mean, I don't know that they're going to want to
That's a
change
big
it, but
one, but
enough
okay.
people get hot about something, we can change the way our society is. Okay, so let's
I'll
talk
do
about
this.
voting for a second.
I'm gonna keep.
You can vote
push for
in the
this
United
idea.
States if you
I
are a
don't
legal
think it'll
U.S.
work.
citizen, 18 years or older. You must not be serving a sentence of confinement, detention, or parole for a felony conviction. So if you were convicted of a felony and you're still on parole, you just have to wait until you're off parole.
It
And
does
then you can go back to
depend,
voting.
though.
Okay, so common misconception that if you've committed a felony, you can no longer vote, and that's just not true. You just have to, in Colorado, yeah, you just have to wait until your parole is up. That may not be the same in other states. Other states may be more restrictive, but here in Colorado, as soon as you're off parole, yeah, you can vote again. And it's not affected by misdemeanors. You commit a misdemeanor, it doesn't do anything to your voting. Colorado is a very voter-friendly state, one of the friendliest I've seen. You can register to vote up to and including on election day at the polls. You can have never registered to vote in Colorado. You can go to the polls and register right then and vote. It's pretty amazing. We have 2 weeks of early voting. We have mail-in ballots. One thing I want to say about electioneering, anybody familiar with this concept? So when you go to the polls, you can't campaign for any candidates or any propositions or ballot measures. You can't voice your preference. Get in, vote quietly, get your sticker, and go. And you won't be guilty
You have
of
to be.
electioneering.
You have to be so far
it is
away
illegal.
from a
I think it would
place
probably
to do it.
depend on, what
I think
how
it's